Would you say that you grew up in a house with a lot of money?
No.
No?
Everything else. I wouldn't say we were poor, but I grew up with an overwhelming sense that we never had enough. The most commonly used phrase in our house was, we can't afford that. What do you think? I'm made of money. Yeah, so in our house, there was just a theme of lack, like a very strong theme of lack, never enough, always kind of trying to make ends meet, and just a lot of stress, a lot of stress around money. And so I guess unwittingly it kind of created this frame that, money is unstable, money is unsafe, there's never enough. And, I honestly believe that's what drove me in the early days because, I say voids breed values.
When did money become important to you then? Because obviously there's these voids, and was there ever a time where you're like, I'm going to be rich one day, or I'm going to make sure I'm not in this position, or anything like that come up?
I don't consciously remember going, I'm going to be rich one day, but I just, when I tune into it, I feel there was just this constant sense of one day I'm going to have more. One day I'm going to have more. And it wasn't about necessarily being rich. Yeah. But then what's really interesting is when you look at my behaviours when I got close to being able to work. Like I remember in Townsville when I first became of age to be able to work, there wasn't a lot of work around, and I used to just walk to shop asking for jobs because I wanted to make money. And at the age of 12, I wasn't allowed to work. I was like, fuck, I'm going to find a way to make money. So, we sold the horse shit. Then we sold the chocolates. And so I had a bit of a taste for it. But what's interesting is we just didn't keep going with that. Like, I'd mow lawns here and there. But as soon as I was of age to get a job, I was like, now I can finally work. No one would give me a job.
Why?
Because there was not a lot of jobs around. And I was like this 14, 15, I was like 14, I think was the age, 14-year-old kid in Townsville. I walked to all these different shops asking for jobs and no one would give me a job because I was either too young or I didn't have any experience. And so I worked this out myself. I was like, fuck it. And so one day I walked into this menswear shop that was at a shopping centre that I used to catch my buses from. So it was like I'd catch my bus from home to this shopping centre and then I'd walk to school because it was just down the road. And then I'd walk from school to the shopping centre and then I'd catch my bus home in the afternoon. And it was a rough joint, like that shopping centre, fights every day, like it was a rough joint. But they had this high-end menswear store. It's called Stag Menswear. It sounds horrible, but the stag was the fucking deer. But it was like, at the time in Townsville, it was like the highest quality clothes you could get in Townsville because it was, at the time, it was the Jag, it was the Palmer, it was that kind of realm of high end. And I went to them, I said, can I work for you? I'll work for you for free for 3 months if you give me a reference.
Wow.
And, I told the guy, this big he was an AFL player, big AFL player, look, I'll tell the boss. So he told the boss and the boss was like, clearly he was like, fuck yeah, free labour. But it was just as we came into Christmas season. And so I ended up working full-time, and I'm talking 7 days a week, 9 till 9.
What?
That's what they do pre-Christmas, like in the olden days.
This is your holiday.
This is my holidays. And so I'm working 9 till 9 till 9 till 9. But what was interesting, my first week, I outsold everybody. I outsold everybody on the floor, and I'm this little kid. And so then the boss of the big shop at Nathan Plaza, because this was Willows, he saw the sales statistics. He's like, fuck, I'm getting this kid into Nathan because this is the big shopping centre. Like, it's the main shopping centre, I think at the time, outside of the CBD. So it was called Nathan Plaza. And so they got me in there. And first week there, I outsold everybody, outsold the manager. And then from there, I got the reference. We moved almost immediately to Brisbane. And I used that reference to get a job at another menswear store, which was Lowe's. And it was a fucking horrible job. But from there, I went and got a job at Sizzler, but then I got a job as a labourer. So Monday to Friday, I'd finish school, go, and I was working in the gym as well. So I'd wake up normally at 5:30 in the morning. At 5:30 in the morning, I'd have to catch a taxi to a gym that was like 3 or 4 suburbs away, like probably 25-minute drive. And I had to pay for the taxi. Then I'd work in the gym from 5:30 until 8:30. And then I'd have to run to school because I couldn't afford another taxi because otherwise it would be negative. I'd have to run to school from 8:30 and to try and get to school by 8:45. I was late subsequently every single day. I was late because I had to run. And then I'd finish school at 3:15. I'd catch a bus to Shayla Park Shopping Centre where I'd work at Sizzler, and I'd do clothes whenever I could. So, most days I'd be working from 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon till, depending on the night, it was between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. And then weekends, I was either working at Sizzler or I was a labourer. And so, carrying bricks, laying pavers. And so I had this desire to make money.
Was that a desire to make money?
Yes.
Were you inspired by that?
Yes.
So you worked because
Yes.
not just for fun.
No,
This is
and by this stage also it's important to realise, like, during all of this, I moved out of home. So I moved out of home just before 16, right?
Right, okay.
And so when I moved out of home, I'm still doing all of this, right? But now I have to pay. I now have to pay to survive. And so now it's like, and I'm not just doing this to make money. Now I'm doing this to live. And so I had to learn from a very early age, like you, how to take care of myself. But yeah, I just always felt like there wasn't enough. And what was interesting is I was never able to keep the money. Like, I'd always like get a bank.
Really?
Yeah, get a bit of a bank, and then I'd spend it on my friends. You know, and that was
hole in your pocket.
always as a young fella, I found it very hard to save because I was always spending money. And what's interesting is because I wanted to have the things I never had. I wanted to buy lollies. I wanted to be able to buy food that I wanted. You know, I wanted to be able to. I was never really big on clothes, but you know, I want to be able to buy clothes. I want to be able to go to the movies. I want to be able to, you know, just do things and be able to do things with my mates. You know, and that was a big thing for me, is being able to pay for my mates to do things. And that was a theme all the way through and probably till my mid-30s.
That is where that comes from is so cool.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, as you've mentioned, being in the security scene and then, you know, eventually drugs and things like that, that resourcefulness then becomes a big factor in getting what you want.
I always had money for drugs.
Yeah.
Always. Friends would say, oh, I'm broke, I don't have any money. It's like, fucking get a job. It's like, you're not a serious drug addict. But I think, and I only just realised this now, I think on reflection, the two voids I had when I was young was money and friends. You know? Because I had friends that lived around me, and I had a lot of good, close friends, but I was always the weird kid at school. And you know, the kids I grew up with, I was friends with, but when I'd go to school, like, I'd just feel like this anomaly. And so I honestly, and I only just really kind of, it just clicked right now. It's like, fuck, two voids. And the voids of lots of friends and the void of money. And so I used money to share with the experience of my friends, maybe subconsciously hoping that that would, you know, buy friendship. And in the early days of my entrepreneurial career, I used to try and flaunt my success to attract women. Whereas now, it's anything but, you know. If someone mentions that they know me, I'm not interested.
Yeah, downplay.
Yeah.
So you also said that you've had over 40 jobs. So you're not the guy.
Almost 50, probably. Yeah.
Right. So you're not the guy who just got out of school and decided I'm going to be a businessman and have never worked for anybody else or done anything. Because a lot of people would relate to that story of, I don't know what I want to do, I don't know where my place is. What did that experience give you of having to work? And
the thing I realised by the time I started my first job, I realised I just hated being fucking told what to do. I hated not having my freedom. When I had the security company, you know, that was a huge wake-up call to me, because even though it was my business and I was like the major shareholder in it, I wasn't the owner. I didn't run it like it was my business. I was getting treated like an employee. I was being paid 21 grand if I'm lucky. You know, the business went down and I got nothing. You know, all I got was debt. So I was like, okay, well, maybe the business thing isn't for me. But when I went back to work with Cubby, when I went back to the workforce, my goal was always to learn what I needed to know so I could go and do it again. So I wasn't scared off it. But when I came back and did it again after resigning from Cubby and I started making big money, that's when I learned it wasn't about the money.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. You've mentioned, you know, finding deeper purpose and how that's helped you with your life, but also your business.
Yeah.
When did it happen that it wasn't about money? That's a massive shift.
That was a long journey. You know, Jim Carrey says, I wish everyone could make all of the money, have all of the success and all of the fame that they desire, so that they can realise that's not the answer. And what's interesting is, I used to follow Jim Carrey a lot from a very early age, and you know, I remember even when I was working for Covey, just after my business had failed, and I think it was just before I started with Covey, I read this article about Jim Carrey, how he wrote a check for $20 million and he kept it in his wallet. And I did that for like 6 years. I went through like 3 or 4 checks because the checks would just break down. I'd sticky tape them back together. And I remember one time my wallet got stolen out of my car and the police officer said, was there any money in your wallet? I said, well, no, there wasn't, but there was a check for $20 million. And he looked at me like, what? I said, oh yeah, but it was a check to myself. And he's like, looked at me like, you're a fucking weirdo. But then, you know, I had that incident when I was with this girl when I started having success, and then all of a sudden she started going all weird about the money, and I was like, fuck, okay, she's clearly in this for the money now, which wasn't the case when we got together because I was dirt poor. I just had a business fail.
How did that make you feel?
It was really uncomfortable. It was really because all of a sudden I was like, fuck, I thought I'd met someone who wants me for me. But then as soon as I started making money, and at that point I remember by making money, all of a sudden, over a period of 3 months, I went from having no money in the bank to having I think it was like $36,000 of cash in the bank. And I'd never had that much money in the bank before. I'd made a lot of money, but I'd never had in my bank, my personal spending. And she just was like, well, I want access to the money. I want to be able to access the money. And I knew she was a spender because she had bad habits of spending that I'd tried to rein in with her while we were in a relationship together so that she could afford to live. And I was just like, oh, fuck, this is just headed for disaster. And I just saw something in her that I'd never seen before. And I was like, oh, and it scared me. And it was hard because she was deeply hurt. I was deeply hurt. But it wasn't until I then moved to the Gold Coast and then I was like, right, now I'm going to live. I'm going to get myself, I had a fucking killer apartment on the beach in Broad Beach, but I also hired like a 5-bedroom house for my office. So I lived in this beautiful apartment where all the action was, and I had this house that was like 12 minutes away that was this 5-bedroom house on the water with a pool, like on the canals, beautiful house that I brought all the guys that I was working with into, and I was like, okay, you guys can rent offices. We can all rent offices from me, and we can grow this business. And that next year, I think I banked $750,000.
What were you doing?
I was working with. So, although I was my own boss, I was a joint venture partner, growing their business, and I took their business from like 400,000 to 8 million in the first 18 months.
You're living the good life.
But I'm happy, So I bought a convertible Porsche. I bought a convertible BMW. I was buying the most expensive clothes. I was dating these hot chicks that just, they were just in it for the money. And I was just like, okay, I know, now I've got the money, I feel great.
Yeah, how did you feel?
I didn't feel great.
What?
Yeah, and that's why I was like, oh, fuck, okay, so I'll go and buy lots of clothes. Oh my God, I'm wearing really nice clothes. 2 weeks, yeah, I'm fucking great. 2 weeks later, I'm back at where I was.
Okay, don't ruin the dream for everyone that money can't buy happiness.
Well, I'm going to. It was like a combination. Once I had money, I'd be happy. Got the money in my account, and then I was like, oh, I still feel empty. Okay, I'll get the cars. Got the cars. I was excited for a couple of weeks, and then I was feeling empty again. Had the house and the water, the apartment. Got the house and the water, the apartment. Oh my God, it was exciting for a couple of weeks, and then I was fucking, I felt empty again. Then it was the girls, then I felt empty again, and I was like, fucking hell, what's missing? And this was through like an 18-month journey of acquiring and realizing that it meant nothing. And then at the end of it, the joint venture broke down, and I was exited from the building in a really unhealthy kind of way. And I was like, well, what am I going to do now? So I'm going to go and find myself. Literally 3 days after I got kicked out of the company, or it might have even been the next day, I walk into Flight Centre, I was just like boom, 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 boom. And then I think it was a week and 2 weeks later, I'm packing a backpack. Next thing I know, I'm in a fucking sporting goods store buying a backpack and hiking shoes and rolling clothes up to see what I can fit in, and then I was off.
To find yourself?
To find myself.
What were you hoping to find?
Salvation. And by salvation, I mean liberation. Liberation was I didn't feel free. I just felt lost. I didn't know who I was, because I thought I'd be better every time I had, I was attaching my identity so much to everything outside of me, because as a child, I was this weird kid. So, well, if I can just cover that up with something else, then maybe I'll be attractive to the outside world. And yeah, I just, the best way I could describe it, I just had this feeling in my gut that I just wasn't right. That something wasn't right, I wasn't right, and I had to find something to find what was right. And what's interesting is I thought it was I knew it was a spiritual journey, because I'd already done the deep Vipassana at this point. I'd already done a lot of meditation, but I still was looking out there, and yeah, that was interesting.
It's scary to look inside.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think that's probably the biggest challenge for most people, and the reason they don't, because oftentimes they don't like what they see, and so they don't really see everything. They only perhaps look at what they want to.
So you did this around the world, all these spiritual places. You land back in Sydney and you realise...
Literally as the plane touches down, I'm sitting there going, because I'm flying, I'm on the plane, I'm like, fuck, I didn't get what I wanted. I've done all this work. I've travelled all this way. I think I'd spent, in that 6 months, I'd spent like 70 grand on travel. Like just travelling around, because what I'd do is I'd backpack for a couple of days and go, fuck this, and then check myself into a 5-star hotel. And then I'd go back to a hostel. And because every now and then I want to have a good sleep and a good feed. And then ultimately, yeah, when I landed, I was just like, fucking hell. I was literally like, you idiot. Like, fucking hell. It was like, I slapped myself. I still remember, because I was sitting on an aisle seat, I can still see the fucking, in economy though, the fucking, what do you call it? The handrest with the button. And I put my hand down here and I went, oh, damn it. I think I've been looking in the wrong place. And then, the plane landed. I was like, and I'm walking off the plane in this stupor of, okay, well, at least you had a good time. But now, I was like, now there's another journey.
Yeah, which is the journey of finding your purpose, which is incredible, around helping people, personal purpose, helping business owners succeed. And how did that change you as a business person once you had a real purpose? Well,
it was still quite a few years until I found it, because I got off the boat. I literally moved to Sydney that week because I was living on the Gold Coast. Made some arrangements to partner with another couple over here that were specialising in a particular vertical of businesses here. And I was like, yeah, I like these guys. We'll partner together. Flew to the Gold Coast, packed all of my stuff into my little fucking Z3, as much as it's fucking piled up high on the fucking passenger seat. Sped all the way to Sydney. I still remember driving over the Harbour Bridge and going, right, this is my new life. Like, I was really excited in the anticipation. Got into this partnership, and the partnership didn't go well. I made them a lot of money because that's what I do. But as soon as I started making the money, the relationship went weird. And then I was like, okay, fuck this, I'm out. I'm going to go and do some consulting. And I think it was probably like
Which is also, can we just pick up a cycle of you helping, getting burnt?
Yeah. Oh, man, it was like make money, get burnt, spend all your money. Make a lot of money, get burnt, get kicked out, go and start again. Okay. And although I didn't get kicked out with this partnership, it became quite toxic at the end. And thankfully we're friends again now. But it just was like really toxic. And so then for 2 years, what saved me is in that first business where I was the joint venture partner, I built quite a good property portfolio. And so I was quite smart with money. Although I was spending money, I was still like, because everyone was in that business was like, yeah, let's fucking buy heaps of property. It was a really good time. And so during that when I got to Sydney, it was almost like this 2-year hiatus of just getting by. Like, I was living in a beautiful apartment. I drove a beautiful car. I was wearing beautiful clothes, but I was doing just enough work to get by.
Yeah.
I wasn't banking cash. I wasn't saving money. I was paying my mortgages. I was being able to pay all of my mortgages, and I had enough left over to pay my rent and eat nice food and drink nice wines and that kind of thing. But I didn't have any bank rolling up. And it was at the end of 2 years, I then got approached by one of the partners from the early business. He said, look, I've got an opportunity for you. I think this is something that's right up your alley. Fly up to the Gold Coast. I want you to meet with one of my previous licensees. He's expanding a franchise into Australia. And so that's when I flew up to the Gold Coast, and this guy tried to sell me this franchise for $3 million, which was basically a consulting master franchisee for Australia for this consulting franchise. And he'd done it really well, where he'd been selling franchisees to high-level ex-CEOs, ex-managing directors, financial controllers, and he was giving them a framework to actually go out and consult to small businesses. And it was actually the best thing I'd seen at the time, because there was another company in the Australian market that was doing it, but they were a little bit sketchy. And I looked at him, I was like, yeah, it's really good. And he goes, $3 million from that franchise. I was like, yeah, no, not interested. I said, I can make you a lot more money than you can make me. And I know I fucking can. And so it was like I'm not kidding, it was a 5-hour negotiation. Wow. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And in the end, I got the deal for 1.1 million, no money down. And all of the payments would only come out of revenue generated from sales.
Oh, fantastic.
With no extended liability. If I chose to walk away, I could walk away with no liability.
You'd learnt a few lessons.
I learned some fucking great lessons along the way. And so sure enough, this guy had been it was a global franchise, but the franchise had been in Australia at this point for 2 or 3 years and made almost no money. Like maybe it made $320,000 over the 2 or 3 year period from the master licensee that he originally had. I took over in the first 9 months, I did 6.9 million in sales. So I was selling, $1 million territories, for WA, Queensland, Victoria. And then I sold 60 to 70 franchises as well. These are $80,000 franchises. because we had this great deal going where Seek was allowing us to advertise the business in the job section on Seek. And I don't know how we got through, but for the first 18 months I was able to do that. So I was generating anywhere between 40 to 100 leads a day. Because people would look for a job, but they'd read it and then see it's a franchise opportunity and they'd submit. And so all I had was one PA, and I'd come in at 8 a.m. in the morning and I'd just fucking bang the phone all day, qualifying, and then I'd send out these information packs to the ones who qualified. And then I'd follow them up, and then I'd basically... and by the way, I'd probably closed 50% of those deals on the phone. These are $80,000 deals, $88,000 including GST. And I was making 50% of all the money that was coming out. So of the revenue that I generated, I was taking 50% home. But what was interesting, within the first 3 months, as soon as I started making this guy money, because the other 50% of the 50% that was going back to him was going towards paying the master franchise fee.
Yeah.
And then once that extinguished, I was going to be getting 75%. And this dude all of a sudden clocked at 3 months marks. He's like, fucking hell, this is a great deal for Kerwin. It's not exactly a great deal for me, for a change. And he rings me up and was like, yeah, we're going to have to change this deal. And I was like, no, we're not. And he's like, yeah, we're going to have to change. I was like, mate, you change the deal, I'm gone. I said, I know I'm your golden boy. I said, I know what everyone else is doing all around the world. I said, I know I'm making you money. No one else is making you money like I am. If you want the deal is as it stands, but I'm not changing the deal. So it's like back and forth, got a little bit edgy, but he's like, fuck it, he's got me between a rock and a hard place. Because I was basically funding I didn't realise at the time, but I found out later, I was funding the entire franchise. So that went really well until just before the end, 6 months before it all went tits up. I'd sold a franchise to this one guy, I won't mention his name, and in his first 3 months, he basically went and sold, I think 4 or 5 deals as a consultant at 10 grand a month. And so he had a 50 grand a month revenue stream coming in. And I was like, dude, you're doing really well. He goes, yeah, I'm really good at getting the deals, but I'm not enjoying doing the consulting. Oh. And I was like, I think there's an opportunity for us to work together here. What if you become the rainmaker for new franchisees and you work up some kind of a deal? And so we brought a couple of franchisees on, and he started being the rainmaker, and he was getting them deals, and he was doing profit splits with them. And it was really good because I could then use him as a reference when I was selling people. And he's like going, yeah, I'm fucking making heaps of money, but what I'm doing is I'm actually going out and selling the consulting, and I'm giving to other people. And in fact, if we get along really well, I could do the same for you. And so that became a bit of a... And so then he starts going, I can see I'm really helping you make some money here. I'm like, yeah, you are. And you're doing a good job. He goes, let's be partners. And I was like, fuck. And this is the partnership. And I was like, oh, dude, I don't know. My experience, not good. And then he started to pressure me. And I was like, oh, fuck it, what have I got to lose? And I did it. And it just all went tits up. He stopped doing deals. Where I went wrong was by using him as a reference, he oversold. Yeah. And so created this expectation that things weren't going to be so well. And so when he ended up having the legal suit put against him, I was then fucking pulled into it. Yeah. And he's like, well, I've got no money. So I had to fund the legal defense. And it was at that point, the lawsuit had gone on, lawsuit got dropped. And it was at that point I left, and I was like, right, I'm just going to go and have some fun. This is around 2005, 2006, I think. 2005, 2006. Yeah. And I'm shit with the dates. That was when my best mate moved in. I'd broken up with a girlfriend. We partied for like 18 months, 2 years. I spent all of my liquid cash to the point where I had no liquid cash. All I had was my assets, and I had to start liquidating assets. And it was at that point I was like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? And this is where I started to find my purpose.
So you'd planted that seed of, I need to go within, or I need to find what I'm looking for within, and then it sort of was like a series of... It was
a series of unfortunate events to learn how to trust my intuition, learn how to become connected with my intuition, and learn to know, okay, this feels wrong, there's a big money opportunity here, but it doesn't feel right. This has happened 3 or 4 times now. 3 or 4 times you made big money, but it didn't feel right and it didn't go well. Let's maybe trust this now. And it was at that point, I was like, okay, I've got to do this by myself. And I literally was like, okay, so what am I going to do? All right. And I started traveling the world and going to internet marketing seminars to get the latest and up-to-date cutting-edge information. Because I'd already done seminars all the way through this. But it was this point where I was like, okay. And I remember I did my first event at Vibe North Sydney. And I think I sold it for $29. And I think we had like 47 people in there. And yeah, I started making sales again. And I ran my very first masterclass My very first masterclass, I think, had 12 or 16 people in it. Maybe 16 people. And that's what, I was like, yeah, this feels right, this feels good. And then just kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going. And at this point, in that transitional period, it's like, what do I love to do? Okay. I look back historically, what are the things that I always do really well that I really enjoy? Well, I love helping people. Okay, what am I really good at? Well, I'm really good at business. I'm really good at the marketing. I'm really good at the sales. Okay, I really love teaching that stuff. Okay, so what if we did this by ourselves? Because up until that point, I always thought I needed somebody. Oh, I couldn't possibly do this by myself. I need someone to help me. Yeah. And it was at this point, this is the first time I actually backed myself. I was like, you know what? I'm going to back me.
Is part of that having a bigger reason to do it as well, other than just because you're good, you know you're good at making money, you know you're good at growing businesses, but having that reason why, that meaning behind it, did that help you accelerate or push past any sort of threshold?
I don't think that came into it at that point to push me through at that point. I think it was I think at that point it was driven out of, yes, this is what I love, but you actually need to start making money, because if you don't, your property's going to start being foreclosed on. You know? Life came in and it was like, okay, you've got to do this. But my decision was, I'm not going to do it unless it feels right. And this is where the intuition started to play a much bigger role.
So you didn't just wake up one day with a purpose. Your purpose has evolved very beautifully and organically over many years.
Yep.
So I think some people think it just happens.
It never happens. You know, it's in the pursuit of the purpose that it's revealed, or it's in the pursuit of, and I don't know, I even look at that differently. I think it's in the pursuit of experiences that we uncover the experiences we enjoy, and with a level of, awareness around, I really enjoy this. What's the commercial application? How can I commercialize this? Then an entrepreneurial opportunity is born.
I love that. And you've obviously had a lot of experience to be able to teach people. Like one of your greatest things that you say is, I'm not better than you, I've just had more fuck-ups.
Yeah.
And with business, you've definitely got a lot of experience to be able to teach people. You've got a formula now, right?
Yeah.
Marketing, though, is that something you're native to, because you've got that personality, social media, you put yourself out there? What's your experience being with marketing to get to where you are as a marketer?
Well, it's interesting. My early journey of self-development led to marketing, because it was when I was in my late teens, early 20s, when I'd been working at a fitness equipment shop for a couple of years. I was really good at selling the fitness equipment. They sacked me because I was late every day for 3 months. They didn't know until I checked the security records, because I'd just fallen out of love with the job. I was waking and baking. I wasn't really into it. And then I went and worked for a company called FAI, Home Security, where I started to sell alarm systems door to door. And it was a great business, because that's what set me up for my own security company, because I basically got approached by ADT after that. But they had a fundraiser night where they did a charity night and they did an auction. And at this auction, and at this point I'd read a couple of self-development books. I'd read like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I'd read The Magic of Thinking Big, and a couple of others. But at that charity event, there was a book called Unlimited Power, Tony Robbins. And I'd heard all this hype about Tony Robbins. I was like, oh, fuck, I've got to get this book. And so I read that book and I treated it like a manual. And I started using everything in that book to start, like, literally surgically changing my brain, surgically changing my life. And things started to improve, things started to get better. But then I had this desire to want to teach it to other people. And then I started to teach it to the guys at FAI. And then when I got approached by ADT and I set up my own security company, I started to teach that information to those guys. And then when that ADT business went down because the business partner did the wrong thing again, I'm left here and I'm like, well, fuck, what skills do I have? And I'm like, well, the skills, I had to go and get a job with Franklin Covey, but at the end of the Franklin Covey period, I was like, I've paid off all my debts. I'm now ready to do it again. I was like, okay, so what skills do I actually have? I really understand the psychology of influence. I really, I was the top salesperson at Covey. I'd introduced, marketing to them in terms of email marketing and direct marketing. And I just all of a sudden realized, well, fuck, that's maybe where I should go. And then serendipitously went to a property event where I connected with this guy who connected me with Peter's son. And that's where I met Peter. And that's kind of what led me. And he's like he's the J. Abrahams of Australia. And so I did my apprenticeship with him. He ended up being in partnership with, and I was the joint venture partner to the business that I took from 400,000 to 8 million. And that's the prequel to the other story. And I just realized that, I learned so much about psychology and influence that the most commercial application was in marketing.
Yeah.
I intellectually broke this down, rationalized this. Okay, I understand psychology, I understand persuasion, I understand influence, I know how to change people, I know how to motivate people, I know how to sell. I've got a pretty good grasp of marketing.
So then social media comes along and disrupts marketing a little bit.
Massively.
Yeah. How was that time for you?
It was a very interesting time because at the time I wasn't fully conscious of what was going on. I was writing it, but really poorly, but thought I was doing better than some people, so I thought I was doing okay, but I really wasn't. But what I started to notice was the effect at the client level. I started noticing, clients were really starting to struggle, and what I started to notice was a lot of the old school marketing strategies that we were using just weren't as effective anymore. The stuff that the die-hard, and it's making a comeback now, but the die-hard direct mail stuff, no one was reading letters anymore. Advertising, less people were reading newspapers anymore. And so, I had clients that we used to do everything from classified ads to quarter-page ads, half-page ads, radio, and direct mail. And all of a sudden we're starting to go, fuck, this is working less and less and less. And I was like, okay, fuck, I need to catch up. And that's where serendipitously, Gary comes in. I meet Gary. Gary completely slaps me around the head. And it was at that point I went away over Christmas of 2014, and I came back and I was like, something's got to change. It's going to be social media. Right, I need to find myself a filmmaker. Gary's got a filmmaker. I just sensed what I was like, this guy's onto something. I know what he's onto something. And at this point, he's like 565,000 on Facebook. Maybe less than 100,000 on Instagram, maybe 100,000 on Instagram. But I started seeing this growth. I was like, fuck, he's onto it. He knows what's going on. He can see where it's going. And that's where, I had my first filmmaker who was a complete dick, scumbag. And then the universe brought me Maddie. And we've been in love ever since.
Yeah, very much a love story there. So it's been a couple of years. It's been 3 years.
2015, 16, 17. Was it? When did you come? 16. No, so Christmas 2015. So it's 2016, from March 2016, 17, 18. Wow, is this going to be 4 years we've been together?
Oh my God.
No, 3.
3 now.
3.
Because that 3 years is not long to have the sort of results that we've had. So, where did we go from versus where we are now? Let's talk about some of those milestones, because they've been pretty fucking huge.
They're pretty huge, yeah.
You started off with Facebook. I think at that time you said something like 10,000.
No, 52 or 54,000 followers on Facebook. 32,000 of those had come from one post that I did about a donkey falling down a wall.
Yeah.
A well, yeah.
Which was huge.
We should rehash that.
Yeah. Definitely rehash that. And now how many people have we reached? Do you know off the top of your head those numbers?
Let's have a little.
120 billion.
750,000 people we've reached around the planet. 750 million, I should say.
And so when did you realise that, okay, you've got the knack for marketing, you've got a formula, you've transferred a lot of that onto social media, plus picking up some of the new techniques.
Yep.
And then there's this influx of people going, Kerwin, teach us what you're doing.
Yep.
We need to know too. Did you had to sort of put together some sort of manual?
Well, what's interesting, I already had the marketing brain, so I think that's where, I had that advantage, and that's Gary did too. Gary already had the sales and marketing brain. The better the salesperson you are, the better the marketer you are. Okay, and the better the marketer you are, the more you understand, direct response and attention and, pre-framing, priming, seeding. It kind of helps you understand what it is that is required to penetrate people's psychology. But a lot of that has changed now. With social media, it's become more about personality, the personality of a brand. And I'm even talking about not necessarily like a Richard Branson or a Gary Vaynerchuk or a Tony Robbins, but even when you look, or even others, but even looking at the personality of the brand of what are the teeth boys? What are they called?
High Smile.
High Smile. That brand has a really quirky personality. When you look at their content, they have a really quirky personality. We look at certain computer companies online or certain industries or certain service companies that they don't have a figurehead at the top, but they provide an element of personality in their content that that really drives the engagement. And personality comes in the form of education. It comes in the form of information, education, entertainment, humour, contrast, shock, or even just, I guess what you call, either trend setting or in most cases, trend writing. People seeing a trend and they just get onto that trend and they start sharing that content. So it's changed a lot. And so I had to basically look at what we did very early on, because what's interesting is we actually didn't start talking about social media straight away, did we? It took us a year of testing, measuring, deploying, finding out what worked before we actually started sharing it with the rest of the world.
Okay.
So we didn't just get into social media and go, this worked last week, let's show you what is working, what we've done. We spent a good 12 months actually learning the model, learning the system, learning the platforms, learning about content. And what's interesting is we probably had some of the most epic growth during that time with the least amount of content. It's quite interesting on reflection. So this is where it became really interesting, because then we started blowing up businesses of all shapes and sizes. We started, getting clients making money that are in drilling, who grind concrete, who have prefab concrete, who build cabins, who, spray lines on roads, and, there was this whole spectrum of clients, artists, accountants, bookkeepers, and they're all starting to fucking tradespeople, garden edging people, and they're all like blowing up on social media. We're like going, wow, how is it that, this is quite interesting, because it really did kind of deframe the whole, well, you've got to have a really solid personality in order to, dominate in social media. So, well, it's not so much about that. You have to have a certain personality, but the brand has to have a certain personality to be producing content that, as I said, either educates, entertains, inspires, makes people laugh, makes people cry, or touches them in some meaningful way.
Yeah, it's not exclusive to a certain industry. You don't have to be Gary Vaynerchuk to be successful on social media.
Not at all.
Wow. So, what would you say to a business owner who is either pre-business journey or just beginning, after this whole, you've shoveled shit, you've gone bust, you've started again, you've found your purpose, you've been, right at the bottom, and you're here now? What would you tell them in the sense of if you were just starting out again?
Like the words that keep coming to mind, but it's a little bit harsh, is you either evolve or you die. Mother Nature is quite incredible. With the organisms that don't evolve, they become extinct. And I think businesses is one of those games. If you don't evolve as a person, as a business owner, to what's happening in the market, you will become extinct. And that's something that a lot of people don't really understand, that business is really driven by your ability to generate a level of attention around what is it you do that will lead into interest, that will lead into some form of contact, that will lead into some form of relationship that ideally will result in some form of a transaction that produces revenue that then continue as a relationship that will then lead to ongoing business. If you've got the personality to generate leads and to sell people, but if you don't provide a good quality experience, you're going to have to be constantly working at that front end. You're going to have a hole in your bucket. But it's learning how to master that. How do I get the attention, and build the relationships, build the trust, build the rapport, so that people feel the desire to outreach in order to create the transaction. But then how do I make sure that I'm delivering a product and a service at a high enough level to ensure that they're going to want to come back and say nice things about me on the open market and on social media. And so for me, change is a constant, because where the change happens the most is in that front bit, which is how to capture that attention. And what we're seeing now, and what we've seen since '96 is, the extinction of many traditional businesses who didn't evolve to the internet. And now we're actually seeing, in some cases, the extinction of many internet businesses who aren't evolving in the social media space. And so for me, it's a game of life and death. If you don't evolve as a business owner from a market perspective, you ultimately will become extinct.
Where do people go wrong on social media?
I think the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to social media is they don't produce content. They don't understand content. They don't understand the importance of content, and that content drives everything. The second mistake that they make is they don't understand the culture of each platform. Every platform has its own culture, and if you try to do the same thing on every platform, it's not going to work. And you're also going to become repetitious. And the third mistake that people make is they don't understand that social media is a long game. It takes, on average, as of right now, approximately 18 to 20 exposures before someone becomes turned on enough to want to outreach to a brand, to have a conversation, to walk into a door, to go to their website, or to seriously consider a purchasing decision. 18 to 20 contacts. And most people come from this traditional direct marketing where they're hoping that one ad will sell people, and it just doesn't work that way anymore. And so it's become a much longer game. And so people have to understand that the more you try to sell, the less sales you will actually make from a social media perspective. Social media is all about, it's social media. And what is the root of social? Building relationships. How do you build relationships? Talk about subjects that people are interested in. If you look at the strongest relationships you have in your circle right now, you guys connect on some level because you share an interest. And you talk about their interests, or you have competing interests that you love to compare. But ultimately, it's because there is content that comes out in those conversations that meets the values that you have. And so that's key from the perspective of social, which is understanding what are the conversations that I need to have, content. And then secondly, understanding that sometimes you're going to have to be courting these people for 3 or 4 weeks. Sorry, not 3 or 4, for 3 or 4 months before they're going to be ready to buy. So you've got to get rid of that instant gratification mentality and start to realize that, in order for you to really dominate the next evolution of business, you've got to slow down to go fast. You've got to focus on building the relationship and stop rather than, going and asking someone to sleep with you on the first date, or in the first meeting on the bus or in the car, creepy, You go out for a couple of drinks first. You then go out for a few meals. You then have a few barbecues and a few social outings. And then, once you've developed a strong relationship, then there's going to be a much higher probability that it's going to lead to something more fulfilling than just a one-night stand, And that's what most business owners really are behaving like. They're behaving like people who are looking for a one-night stand. And most customers are turned off by that. Most people, depending on where they are in their stage of life, are turned off by that. But anyone who's looking for a long-term, meaningful relationship will be turned off by the idea of having a one-night stand in most cases. And customers are no different. They're looking for long-term relationships with people that they can like, trust, and respect enough to be able to come back and be able to refer people to them. And the key to being able to do that is having the right conversations that make people come back frequently enough to get the level of exposure that's required to get to that point. And it's not about selling. It's almost got nothing to do with selling at that point. There's covert selling that can be done through the process, which we refer to as seeding. Seeding products, seeding services, within the content strategy, where you're demonstrating what it is that you do, but you're not selling what it is that you do. Now you're talking to clients that have got great results, but you're not actually you're not trying to sell what it is that you do. You don't do it from a sales perspective. You do it from an educational perspective, an information perspective. How can I make this entertaining? How can I make this humorous? How can I make this funny?